She slapped him, thinking he'd stay silent. She had no idea what was coming next. It all started with a parking spot, not a fight over one. No, that would have almost made sense. This was different. This was about something bigger, something unspoken but loud enough to shake the air around them. It was a scorching afternoon in Fort Worth, Texas. The kind of day where the sun pressed down on the pavement so hard you could almost hear the heat sizzle. Dorian, a 42-year-old man who worked long shifts at a local auto shop, had just finished grabbing a few groceries. His t-shirt clung to his back, damp from hours spent in a garage filled with busted engines and the scent of motor oil. He wasn't thinking about much, just his kids waiting at home, the cold drink he'd crack open once he got there, and whether he had enough gas to last him through the week. But then, she came into the picture. A white woman, probably in her late 50s, sitting in the driver's seat of a shiny white Lexus RX. The kind of car that screamed status. The kind of driver who expected the world to move for her. Dorian had just loaded his last bag into his trunk when he noticed her car creeping forward. She wasn't pulling into his spot. He hadn't even left yet. But she was close. Too close. As if his existence alone was an inconvenience. At first he ignored it. Slamming his trunk shut, he reached for his driver's side door, but before his fingers could even graze the handle, he heard it. "Can you hurry up?" Her voice had that certain sharpness to it. Not a request, not a question, a demand. Dorian glanced over his shoulder, locking eyes with her through her half-rolled-down window. He had dealt with people like her before, the type who thought their time was more valuable than anyone else's. Still, he wasn't looking for trouble. "Give me a sec," he said, keeping his tone even. But that wasn't enough for her. She let out an exaggerated sigh, tapping her manicured fingers against the steering wheel. Jesus, some of us have places to be. Here we go. Dorian exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. This wasn't worth it. He was tired, hungry, and truth be told, he had nothing to prove to her. But she wasn't done. When he finally pulled his keys from his pocket and turned toward the driver's seat, her voice cut through the air again. Typical. That word landed differently. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Like a blade slipped between the ribs, casual but deliberate. Dorian's jaw tightened, but he still said nothing. He wasn't going to give her the reaction she was looking for. But she didn't just want him gone. She wanted control. And when she realized he wasn't giving it to her, that's when things took a turn. But she had no idea what was coming next. The air between them felt heavy now, not just from the heat but from something colder. Dorian could feel it, the way she stared, waiting for him to break, to shrink, to move faster just because she demanded it. But he wouldn't. He slipped into the driver's seat, shutting the door with a solid thunk. He took his time adjusting his mirror, rolling his shoulders, making sure he didn't leave anything behind in the passenger seat. He could hear the impatience in the way her engine revved behind him. Let her wait. But as he reached for the gear shift, that's when he heard it. A loud smack against his window. His head snapped to the side. The woman had gotten out of her car. She was standing right outside his driver's side window, her palm still pressed against the glass, her mouth moving a mile a minute. "You're just gonna sit there? Seriously?" she spat, her voice a mix of frustration and something else, something nastier. Dorian blinked. Was she serious? He rolled his window down halfway. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "I don't need to do anything," she shot back, crossing her arms. "You're sitting here wasting everyone's time, acting like you own the place. Some of us actually have lives to get to." There it was again. That tone, that smugness. Like he was somehow beneath her. Dorian exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel to keep himself steady. "I don't know what your problem is, but I suggest you back up and let me leave before you turn this into something bigger than it needs to be." He thought that would be the end of it, He was wrong. Before he could even process it, she reached through the open part of his window and smacked him across the face. It wasn't hard enough to knock him back, but it was enough to make the entire parking lot stop. The slap echoed through the air like the crack of a whip. For a split second, everything went still. The sound of grocery carts rattling in the distance stopped. The idle conversations between strangers cut short. A few people near the entrance of the store turned their heads. She had just made a mistake. A big one. Dorian's skin stung, but that wasn't what got to him. It was the audacity. The way she hit him without hesitation, without fear, as if she had every right to lay hands on him and expect no consequences. But this wasn't some old movie where she played the fragile victim and he played the silent sufferer. Not today. Dorian's jaw clenched as he slowly pushed his door open, forcing her to step back. The second he stood up, the energy shifted. She had been so comfortable when she thought she held all the power, but now, standing face to face with him, her confidence flickered. Dorian didn't yell. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't have to. He took one step forward, just enough to close the space between them. Enough to make her feel what he felt every time people like her pushed boundaries they had no business crossing. His voice was low when he spoke. Controlled. You just put your hands on me. You want to tell me why? She blinked. The attitude was still there, but something behind her eyes shifted. A flicker of hesitation. She hadn't expected him to hold his ground. You were disrespecting me, she stammered, arms folding tighter across her chest. Taking your time like I wasn't waiting. You should have moved. Dorian huffed a short, humorless laugh. And that gave you the right to hit me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. More people were watching now. Someone was recording. The pressure was shifting. She took a step back, trying to regain control. You're making a scene. Dorian tilted his head. Oh, now it's a scene? Because you got caught? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't in charge anymore, but she still had no idea just how bad this was about to get. The tables had turned, and she felt it. That false sense of control, the kind that had carried her through life unchecked, was slipping through her fingers. Dorian wasn't backing down. The eyes of the parking lot were on her now. The power she thought she had, gone. She took another step back, the heel of her expensive sandals clicking against the pavement. Her mouth opened like she wanted to double down, to justify what she had just done. But for the first time since this started, she hesitated. Dorian didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, letting her sit in the weight of her own actions. I should call the police, she huffed, trying to regain her composure. You're... What? Dorian cut in, his voice calm, almost amused. Intimidating you. Her lips pursed, but she didn't answer. You know what's funny? He shook his head, glancing around at the crowd that had gathered. You put your hands on me in broad daylight, in front of all these people. And now, you want to play the victim? Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. People who had been watching quietly were now speaking up. He didn't even touch her, someone muttered. She straight up slapped him for no reason, another person added. A woman in gym clothes holding her phone up chimed in. Ma'am, you're being recorded. Just thought you should know. That did it. Panic flashed in the woman's eyes. Her gaze darted around, taking in the crowd, the cameras, the judgment settling over her like a storm cloud. This wasn't playing out the way she thought it would. You all don't understand what happened, she said, her voice climbing higher. He was being aggressive. Ma'am, the woman with the phone interrupted, her expression flat, unimpressed. We saw the whole thing. Dorian just watched. He didn't have to say another word. She was unraveling on her own. A grocery store employee stepped outside, his bright red polo making him easy to spot. "Is there a problem out here?" The woman spun toward him like she had just found her lifeline. "Yes, this man was harassing me and I—" "She hit him first," someone called out. "Twice," another voice added. The store employee's brows furrowed. His gaze shifted to Dorian. "Is that true?" Dorian exhaled through his nose, rubbing his jaw where the sting of her slap still lingered. "Yeah," he said simply. "It is." The employee sighed and pulled a walkie-talkie from his belt. "I'm gonna have to call the cops." That's when she broke. Her whole body stiffened, her breath hitching. "Wait, no, that's not necessary. Let's not—" "You put your hands on him," the employee said matter-of-factly. "That's assault." "I didn't mean—" she started, but her voice was shaking now. She knew she had lost. Dorian didn't move. He could have said something, could have pressed the issue further. But he didn't need to. The damage was already done. Not to him, to her. Her own arrogance had written this ending, and now she had to live with it. The irony of it all. If she had just kept her hands to herself, none of this would have happened. And now she was the one begging to make it all go away. But it was too late for that.
The silence was deafening. She stood there, eyes darting between the store employee, the people recording, and Dorian, like she was looking for an escape, a way to rewrite what had just happened. But there was no getting out of this. Dorian could see it. The shift. The realization creeping in. All her life she had probably gotten away with things like this. A sharp tongue, a slap here, a shove there. Maybe people looked the other way. Maybe they apologized for existing just to keep the peace. Maybe they let her win because it was easier than dealing with the storm she would cause. Not today. The store employee spoke into his walkie-talkie, calling for security. Someone inside had already dialed 911. A few people in the crowd murmured to each other, some shaking their heads, others just staring. And then, she did what they always do when they realize they're out of options. She changed the story. "Listen," she started, voice softer now, careful. "This is all just a misunderstanding." Dorian smirked. "Oh, now it's a misunderstanding." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to. I just got overwhelmed. It's been a rough day and—" "That's funny." Dorian crossed his arms. "I had a rough day too. You don't see me hitting strangers." Her lips parted like she had something else to say, but she stopped herself. Because what could she say? What excuse could she give that would erase the fact that she had stepped out of her car, walked up to a man minding his business, and slapped him, simply because she thought she could? The sirens weren't far now, the distinct wail of law enforcement approaching. The shift was complete. The fear she had wanted him to feel, the submission she had tried to force out of him, it was now hers to carry. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, voice barely audible over the distant wail of sirens. Dorian stared at her for a long moment. This was the part where she expected mercy. He had seen it before. They play tough until they realize there are consequences. Then, suddenly, they soften. Their voices drop. They lean into the same system they swore didn't exist when it wasn't working in their favor. And for a second, just a second, Dorian thought about letting it go. But then he remembered every time people like him had been told to let it go. Every time someone had been disrespected, humiliated, or worse, just to be told later, "It's not worth it." Every time they were expected to forgive when no one else had to. And in that moment, Dorian knew. This wasn't just about him anymore. So he shook his head. "No, you don't have to do this." And with that, he stepped back, letting justice take its course. But the lesson she had just learned, that was something she'd have to live with for the rest of her life. The flashing red and blue lights painted the parking lot in streaks of color. It was over.
The officers stepped out of their cruisers, hands resting on their belts, scanning the crowd. The woman, whose confidence had carried her through this entire ordeal, was suddenly small. Dorian didn't have to say much. The videos, the witnesses, the store employee, they spoke for him. One of the officers approached him first. "Sir, are you hurt?" Dorian rubbed his jaw absent-mindedly, where her hand had left its sting minutes ago. "I'm good," he said, "but she put her hands on me." The officer nodded. "We got multiple calls, several witnesses confirmed." He glanced over his shoulder at the woman, who was now visibly shaking, arms wrapped around herself. "We'll take it from here." Her head shot up. Panic. "Wait," she blurted. I didn't mean..." But this time no one cared. The officers walked her to the side, started asking questions, started gathering statements. The woman who once felt untouchable was now answering to a system she had probably assumed was always on her side. Dorian stood there, watching. Not gloating, not celebrating, just existing. And for the first time that day, that was enough. The crowd began to break apart, but a few people lingered. The woman in the gym clothes, the one who had been recording, walked up to Dorian. "You okay?" He exhaled, feeling the weight of it all, but nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She gave him a small nod, lowering her phone. "I got the whole thing. If you need the footage, let me know." He gave a half smile. "Appreciate it." Another voice chimed in, a man in his late 50s standing by his truck. "Been a long time coming," the man muttered, shaking his head. "People like her, they get away with it too often." Dorian didn't respond. He didn't need to, because not this time. By the time he pulled out of the parking lot, he could still see her in his rearview mirror, shoulders slumped, reality sinking in. She had walked into this day thinking she could do whatever she wanted. She had walked out of it learning a lesson she'd never forget. And the best part? Dorian didn't have to lift a finger to teach it. Entitlement is a powerful drug. Some people go their whole lives never having to face the consequences of their actions. But sooner or later, the world holds up a mirror. And when that moment comes, some people see themselves for the first time, and they don't like what's staring back. For too long, people like Dorian have been expected to stay silent, to take it, to keep moving because it's not worth the trouble. But standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting back. Sometimes it just means standing still, long enough for the truth to catch up. What do you think? Should Dorian have let it go, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever witnessed something like this, tell your story. Because sometimes, the only thing more powerful than speaking up is refusing to stay silent.